Do you struggle to find your voice in a noisy world? Do you feel your voice lacks confidence and energy to accurately communicate your thoughts, ideas, and passions? Do you wish there was an easy way to give your voice what it needs to captivate your audience every time? My name is Clay Collins, and like you, I struggled with these issues for years. But I found a blueprint that can help you change the way you think about your voice and therefore the way your voice comes across to others. Welcome to the My Voice Mentor podcast. Oh my gosh, I found another typo. Lord, I spelled community with one M. Community. Sorry guys, this is day 2 of the launch of the website, and I had no idea that I was so bad at the English language. I have corrected over 30 typos. I must have just, I don't know what I was thinking. Well, guess what? Today, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about perfectionism. Any of you guys out there struggle with perfectionism? Struggle with if it's not perfect, I'm not gonna do anything, because if it's not perfect, I'm not even gonna bother. Yeah, I think perfectionism is something that we all kind of struggle with a little bit, if we're honest. It's not perfect, and I think for a lot of us, it holds us back. It keeps us from moving forward in life, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we go into that, I wanted to just make you aware of, I have a free 5-day vocal bootcamp that I'd love to just give to you absolutely free. In order to be able to take advantage of that, though, I want you to click on the link on this page in the description, in the show notes, or even possibly on the top right of the screen, or I guess it would be that way. Or that way, I don't know. Anyway, look at your screen. It's going to be up there at the top right or down in the show notes. Click on the link. It's going to take you to my free 5-day vocal bootcamp. It's going to give your voice everything it needs. Well, I mean, not everything, but the most essential things, the most basic thing that you need to start moving your voice in the direction of vocal health, vocal stamina, vocal strength, all of that stuff. It's some of my best tips. I want to give that to you free. All right, let's dive into what we want to talk about today. Perfectionism is something I think we all struggle with, if we're being honest. Perfectionism is, in its sense, it seems like such a good thing. We want to strive for perfection, right? I mean, that seems like a logical thing. So what's the problem with perfectionism, or what's wrong with being a perfectionist? Well, when we were children, we all heard the story of the tortoise and the hare, right? And the story basically goes like this. I'm sure we all remember it, but the story basically goes like this. You've got the hare that was the faster runner. He was the more agile. He's all of those things. And then you had the turtle who was slow and all that kind of stuff. And they went off on a race. And about halfway down the line, the rabbit was so far ahead. The turtle was just kind of coming around. It didn't look like a very fair fight, to be perfectly honest. And so the rabbit, the hare, decided, you know what? Why am I pushing myself so hard? Why am I working? I just need to sit by this tree, enjoy the scenery a little bit, because there's no way this turtle is going to beat me. Well, meanwhile, the rabbit hare falls asleep, lose track of time, hangs out with his buddies, whatever the case may be. And the tortoise kept going on and on, step by step. And at the end, the tortoise wins the race. And there was the moral of that is just that steady steps all the way through is gonna always outpace and beat the hare. And I know that we've all heard this story, but I want to ask you something honestly. How many of you really did not believe it? I'm going to be honest. When I first heard that story, I'm like, this is one of those stories that they tell children. They tell the slower, not as healthy, not as agile, not as athletic. They tell them this story to make them feel better about themselves. But this is a bunch of malarkey, a bunch of garbage. It doesn't work. Well, I'm actually here to tell you that is not just a good allegorical picture of a tortoise and a hare, but it's actually one of life's great truths. Because just because somebody is more talented than you, more apt to succeed, has all the check marks of success, doesn't mean that they're just a shoo-in. And the truth is that a lot of times they do end up outpacing some of us because most of us that don't feel like we're like that, we don't show up to the party. We don't show up to actually do the work. And the truth is that many times they do win. A lot of times that's because many of us decide to give up before we fail or before we give ourselves a chance to succeed. And because we just don't believe that story. And I know when I was younger, I spent a lot of time fearing failure so much that I just basically made the decision, if I'm going to fail anyway, I might as well not put forth the effort. And so it's really taken me really a long time, a lifetime, for me to realize that slow, steady steps will always, not just sometimes, always outpace talent. Basically, the idea that I want to present you with is progress beats perfection. Every single time. And I'm going to break it down why I believe that's the case. The problem with perfectionism is that if you're a perfectionist, there is a ceiling to how high you can go, how far you can go. Because what a perfectionist basically says is, I'm only going to do what I can do perfectly. And for most of us, there's some things that we can do perfectly, but not very many things. So if I limit myself only to what I can execute or do perfectly, that is actually limiting myself to a few things. It's kind of like that old saying that says, master of one or master of none, jack of all trades. Well, a perfectionist is the opposite. They're not a jack of all trades. They're a jack of one trade. If that, because most people don't ever become perfect at one thing. So a lot of us pick up things along the way, jack of all trades. Like, I can do all these things, but I'm not necessarily particularly perfect at any of them. What's going to be more successful? The guy who knows how to do a lot of things or the guy who knows how to do one thing? Well, the guy that knows how to do a lot of things is going to be more useful and successful in life, generally speaking. And so the perfectionist always has a ceiling in their life because they won't execute things that they're not good at. A perfectionist doesn't have the perspective of, I need to get better and better and better. No, they're a perfectionist. I only do what I'm perfect at. So that right there is your ceiling. Whatever you feel like I can do that becomes the plateau. You don't move beyond that. That's one of the problems with perfectionism. So don't be a perfectionist. If you struggle with perfectionism, whatever your standard is that you think, I'm not at that standard, so therefore I'm not going to apply myself, you got to let that go because that's not helping you. That's not pushing you forward in life. Now, on the other hand, progress works in the opposite direction. No matter where I am on the scale, I could be really, really bad at something, or I could be relatively good at something. But a progress-minded person says, all I'm trying to do today, this week, this month, this year is make progress, improve. That's my only goal. If I make 2 inches of progress this week, great. If I make 1 inch of progress today, that's great. I'm not measuring myself on how much progress I make. I measure myself on, did I make any amount of progress? Could I have made more progress? Could I have applied myself a little bit more, maybe made a little bit more? But did I make any progress at all? I have taught piano and voice for many, many years. And really, when you get a weekly time with a student, your only goal is, hey, let's move that ball forward. Have we improved? If we have 4 or 5 lessons where we haven't improved or we haven't moved that ball forward, it's time to sit down and have a talk with the student and say, hey, bud, pal, buddy, are you practicing? Or like, what are you doing to help push yourself along? Because I just know for a fact that steady progress, even if you feel like you have a disadvantage in particular areas or particular skills, and obviously this podcast is all about the voice. So let's just apply it to voice. Maybe you don't feel like you're the best singer in the world or the best public speaker in the world. But if you're regularly making progress, if you can take a look at yourself this week because you're applying yourself, you're listening to this podcast and you're doing the work, if you can say, hey, I'm better this week than I was last week, you will absolutely outpace the perfectionist every single time. Now, you might not see the fruit of that right away. It takes time because they're way out there ahead of you. They're way out there. but you're making steady progress. They're not. And that's the difference. They relied on their talent, their abilities, whatever. You're relying on your relentless, continuous moving forward. All right. So don't be discouraged where you are, wherever you are in that journey. I want to tell you about the day that I was doing the research for the content that I wanted to start building for both the website and for things like this podcast. I started doing some Google searches and trying to find out what my competition was. And of course, that's one of the hardest things in any industry is to look at the competition, look at the people on the other side. Who are the people that are successful at this? You got to look at the successful people because they let you know that it's possible to be a success in whatever you're wanting to do, singing, being an entrepreneur, whatever. It's good to know that there's people doing what you do and they're successful at it, but it's also very discouraging. So I was pairing my YouTube channel up with my competition, and the numbers were just so depressing. I was way, way down here. I don't even think I was a sliver on the bar chart, and my competition was way up there at the ceiling. And I was thinking to myself, oh gosh, what am I doing? Why am I even bothering? How could I even possibly compete with this in this space? And I just wouldn't let myself go there. I knew better because I've gone through some process and I've had people speak into my life. But I said to myself, who has got the most potential for progress? Me or them? Like, I've got the ability to double that tiny little number. Do they have the ability to double their number? I mean, perhaps, but it's going to be a lot harder for them to make 100% improvement on their progress. But my little tiny number, can I go from 600 views to 1,200? Well, I think I can do that. Well, that would be 100% increase. And if I do that a few times, guess what? I'll start really making progress. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. Hopefully, by the time that you hear this podcast, I'm 3 or 4 or 5 years into this, and I've got some great testimonies along the way. But at the time of this recording, I'm still on a process and a journey. Now, I'm 20 years in as it relates to my voice, but I'm pretty new to the online space. I haven't invested in that in the same way. So I'm stretching myself. And so I want to encourage you with your voice, continue to stretch yourself. Don't worry about where you are. Take a look at that gap between where you are and where that person is that you want to kind of be in the same space as them. Look at that gap as the challenge, as the mountain to climb. Look at it as, man, that's the journey. And I want you to really teach yourself to enjoy the journey, because the journey is what's fulfilling. The pursuit of happiness that's the real nobility in all of it. That's why in our Constitution it doesn't say that we have a right to happiness. It says we have a right to pursue it. And it's in the pursuit that we find some of our greatest strengths in humanity, the pursuit of going after the thing that we love. And so my job in that role, my job is to provide a pathway for you. Because as a singer, I might be a few paces ahead of you. I've gone through some of the paths that you're walking through now. I've had some of the same struggles. I've had to wrestle some of the same demons to the ground. I've had to battle my own fears and anxieties as it relates to singing, just like you have. And I've come on the other side of that. So I can easily say you can overcome it too. And so what I want to encourage you in your singing, in your public speaking, don't write yourself off. Don't give your opponent a win by default. It's much better that you give them a good fight. Give them a good fight. You might lose a few along the way. In fact, you're going to lose a few along the way. I don't know if you're going out for auditions, if you're auditioning to be in a musical or whatever the case may be. You're going to get turned down. You're going to get turned down for the whatever, more talented, whatever, because there's always people more talented than us. But if you keep coming up to bat, if you keep setting yourself up, I promise you will absolutely succeed. I want to tell you another story about somebody who to me is one of the biggest inspirations to me. She's one of, I also teach piano, and she's one of my piano students. And she came to me several years ago and didn't have a whole lot of expectations on herself that she would succeed. She was an adult. She was about 26 years old at the time. And she had a learning disability. And for many years, growing up, she struggled even learning how to talk. They weren't even sure if she was going to learn how to speak or how to talk. And, she came to me, she goes, and she was saying it in her way. I don't think I can be very good, but I just want to learn to play piano. And I just looked at her, and maybe it was God helping me, because I just feel like my default is I'm just going to believe in people. I'm going to believe in people. And so I just kind of started speaking into her life. And I said, well, let's look at this practically. I don't want to fill your head with a bunch of false hope. Here you are, 26. You told me that growing up, that they weren't even sure that you were going to learn how to speak, or you're how to speak. Well, look at you, you're talking. He says, yes. I said, you overcame that. You defied the odds. They said you weren't going to be able to speak, and here you are doing just fine. You have just as good of a command of the English language as anybody, And so I said, well, look at what you've accomplished. And then I pointed out, who drove you here today? She said, well, I drove myself. I said, you drove yourself here? You drive a car? She said, yes. I said, well, when was the last time you were in an accident? She said, I've never been in an accident. I said, wait a minute. You're 26 years old, which means you've been driving when did you start driving? Oh, I started driving at 18. Okay, you've been driving for 8 years in traffic with other vehicles, other people, and you've never been in an accident? She said, no. I said, there are people who don't have any struggles or issues that you have, who have already been in probably 3 accidents in 8 years. You haven't had one. You defied the odds there. I said, I've got a prediction to make. I think that you're going to defy the odds in piano. And I'm just going to, I tell you what, I'm going to make a deal with you. I'm not going to expect any less of you than I would expect from any of my other students. I'm not going to expect any less of you. We are going to work as hard as we need to work, and you're going to be a success at piano. And I can honestly tell you, this is one of those stories that just gets me every time. I'm not saying this from the context of her being having a struggle or a disability. I'm saying this because it's true. She is my best piano student. She learns every song exactly the way it's supposed to play. Her musicality is bar none. I could put her in a competition at her level against anybody, and she would do fabulously. Now, I'll tell you what, she practices hours every day. She practices way more. Most of my other students, I can't get them to practice maybe 20, 30 minutes a week or a day. She probably practices 2 or 3 hours a day. But as a result, she has excelled, and she is working her way through some pretty difficult material. And she's conquered that, and she has defied the odds. And so I want to leave you with this today. You can defy the odds too. The odds may seem like they're stacked against you, but you can defy the odds. In fact, you were born to defy the odds. Why is it that when we watch a movie, we always root for the underdog? Because there's something deep inside of us that really wants that guy to win. I didn't set up My Voice Mentor for the pros, the ones making millions of dollars a year on records and all that. I did it for you. I did it because I'm rooting for the underdog. I'm rooting for the guy that just wants to make progress in his life because he knows that there's something missing in his life, and investing in his voice is going to somehow answer that. So I want to leave you with that thought. And I tell you what, since you've made it all the way to the end of this podcast, I really want to offer you something special. If you click on the link in the description, I want to give you 30 days free access to my vocal coaching program. So if you click on the link below, you will be able to get 30 days free access to my online vocal coaching program, where you're going to get over 30 hours of video course content, as well as direct interaction with me as your coach, and an online voice community of people just like you, voiceover actors, singers, songwriters. It's a great community of people all stretching and growing each other. And so I want you to be able to take advantage of that. So click on the link below this video, and I can't wait to see you on the other side of it. But in the meantime, go ahead and rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and I can't wait to see you next week.